I was like really scared of making the jump and didn't think about just how good the things were doing on my path. Like I probably was like 5 or 6 months. It's like in Fast and Furious when the dude presses on the NOS tank and the guy goes like too soon or whatever. It's just, you don't want to like press that button. When you're in your 20s, you have like infinite energy. And you basically think you're going to have that infinite energy forever. I'm a big believer that your life has seasons. And what you want to optimize for, and being able to think freely and be able to choose for yourself rather than have someone choose for you is the important part.
What advice would you have for a young creator, basically someone, you know, in their early 20s who's going down this journey of like starting their own business, not tech startup, there's enough people giving, you know, advice on that, but like who wants to be a content creator, business owner? All right. What's up, man? Super excited that you're taking the time to do this. It's been, I guess, a couple of years since we first started chatting online, but yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here and good to get to do it in person as well.
I know. I've been doing all of these remotely, but I think in person, the energy is just so much better. But
yeah, I totally agree.
But yeah, let's start from the top. I mean, everyone knows and has seen Sahil, the creator, but who is Sahil, the person?
It's a good question. No, I mean, look, I'm first and foremost, I would say, a dad these days. And if you know Sahil, the creator, you probably know Sahil, the dad, because the two have definitely the blurred lines in terms of the content. And we'll talk about it, you know, like just general strategy, if you will, around, you know, sharing a lot about my life. Like people are asking me a lot about that these days. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm basically sharing things about my real life and things that I'm encountering, struggling with, learning, questions I'm asking, you know, frameworks, things I'm wrestling with, etc. And what you see from a creator standpoint is really pretty closely paralleling what I'm doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I've been impressed with how authentic and real a lot of what you're posting seems, which is great. How did you get started with that journey of I guess becoming a content creator?
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say the whole content creator as like a job thing didn't really exist when I started doing it. And that's not to say it was that long ago. I just feel like the last couple of years have really been the rise of this. And so for me, I was marching down like a very traditional finance path. I lived in California at the time. I played baseball at Stanford. When I got done there, I took this job at a private equity fund, and, you know, Indian mother, like, take the job that sounds impressive. You're like successful, you know, it's like nice status signal, etc. Everyone's happy. And really, I just like kind of marched down that path without really thinking about it too much and what I actually wanted to go do. And it wasn't until COVID that I had the chance to like pause, catch a breath, and think about what I actually wanted out of life, and think about, was the game I'm playing a game that I actually wanted to win, and a game that I actually wanted to continue playing over the long run. So, you know, it coincided with a time when a lot of us had free time on our hands for the first time in a while, right? Like I went from working 80 to 100-hour weeks to being stuck at home, having no social life, you know, not having as much work, not traveling, no commuting, etc. So for me, that was when I started writing. I had always loved writing growing up. You know, I had like, prior to doing any of this, I used to read a lot. I still read a lot, but I was reading a ton of books, and I was like, you know, probably reading about a book a week, maybe even more. And I would send out at the end of every month, originally to like 20 family and friends, a list of like books I read and sort of my reviews of them. Like quick
subscribe link at the bottom.
Yeah, it was just like a pure, like, it was basically a blog that I was just sending out as an email, no formatting, nothing. And people kept sharing it with others, asking me to add people to the list. And eventually it became like, it was over 1,000 people that were getting this. And I sent it once a month for probably 24 months, like from like...
And you were not marketing this?
No. Yeah. I mean, there wasn't a business. I was just like, I just read these books. I'm going to send it out. And it was like CEOs in Silicon Valley. Like, it became a thing where like random people would come up to me, and it was, you know, probably at its peak, maybe like 1,200 people.
How did it grow? Like, was it just...
Literally word of mouth. Like, people were sharing it and just saying, like, no one really had these like... It was just a very organic book list of like cool things that I was reading. And I was reading a pretty broad assortment, so it kind of had something for everyone. Until like 2017 to 2019, it sort of just grew. And then COVID hit, and I knew I liked writing. I knew I liked reading. And I started basically just like on Twitter originally sharing. And I was kind of one of the first people doing the thread.
Mm-hmm.
It was largely because I just couldn't fit things into a single tweet. And I was like, oh, you can comment underneath it and it'll just make it into a longer thing. And so I started doing it originally around what I knew from work, which was finance. And so I was doing like pretty niche finance concepts. Like I don't know, writing
Give me an
about
example,
like, I don't know, why are the markets ripping while everyone's stuck at home and unemployed? And so like my first thread was about that. It was trying to explain like basically the Fed put, the whole idea that the Fed like is a buyer of last resort. And so why that makes markets soar. And I tried to use allegory, use a story to explain it. And pretty quickly I realized there was like quote unquote product market fit to what I was creating, that people were sharing it, they were getting value from it, people were asking for more. And so on the weekends, outside my day job, I was just doing this. I was like stuck at home. I got nothing better to do. This will be fun. And, obviously fast forward now 3 years and it's a little bit bigger than it was then when, I had 500 followers when I first started. So
did you go through any periods of your content not resonating, or did the first thing you did kind of hit?
That was my first thread that I did. And I said to my wife, I wrote it. And I said to my wife, I was like, this is going viral. Yeah. And she just kind of rolled her eyes at me because I had 500 followers. Like there was absolutely no reason to think that. And I posted it and like an hour in, it had like 2 likes, like literally nothing. And I was like, shit, this is embarrassing. Like my wife's going to troll me for this because I called this out. And so I went like, I didn't know how to get it in front of more people because I didn't have that many followers. And so I literally like copied it, and when I saw like a couple of big accounts post a tweet, I would immediately reply to it with mine. I'm saying like on the topic, if it was related. Exactly. But like I was the reply guy. But like Chamath tweeted something about markets, and I commented under it with my thing and said like, oh, if you liked that, I think this would resonate with you. And he ended up retweeting it and saying like, this is good. And that all of a sudden the thing went
Chamath was a big deal at that time.
And it was before he was a super, like he wasn't a million plus. But he had a few 100,000 followers. And so he shared it. And then that first thing did take off and went pretty viral. And, viral on like a scale for a 500,000
of course.
or a 500 follower person. But then I was able to like talk smack to my wife and tell her that it did go viral. And honestly, like since then, I haven't really had a period where like things were quiet. Like it was kind of just up and to the right, but like nothing. There was never one thing that drove. I've seen people go unbelievably viral for like one thing and they get 50,000 followers. I've never had that. Mine has been like dirty, like meat and potatoes, 5,000
like
max new followers. I've just posted, I don't know, I've probably written 300,000 words on Twitter over the course of 3 years, like every single week, at least one thing over the course of 3 years. So there was no hack to it necessarily. It was just like, I just wrote a lot.
I had someone on my team who had a picture of him wearing a face mask that had his actual face, but it was printed one size too small. And he had like 400 followers, but that went viral to like tens of thousands of retweets, hundreds of thousands of likes on the front page of tons of newspapers. But I think he got like less than 500 followers. I mean, if you have things like that are funny, that go mega viral, you don't really get a big following. Nothing.
Like my most liked tweet of all time was like a meme about emails a few weeks ago about phone calls. Like if you have a call at 2:30 in your schedule, it's like a person just ruining your day. And I think that ended up getting like 500,000 likes. And I think I literally got like 50 followers from it. Basically nothing. It's so very, very odd.
So at what point did you, so at this point, you were still working at your job. At what point did you decide to guys blow your career up and be like, I'm starting over?
So in 2020 was sort of the like building phase of this. Like from May of 2020, when I posted my first thing until the end of that year, I grew from maybe like 500 followers to 75,000, I think, by the end of that year. And so that felt enormous to me. I was like, this is huge. But what I actually was doing kind of in the background was there was like a real business that was being built around this. And I didn't talk about it anywhere. But basically, as I was doing that and growing my own personal brand, I was building out these frameworks and blueprints of how someone can grow a personal brand. And this was in the early days of Twitter. No one was like systematizing how to think about growing their personal brand. And so no one had really like done a course on that. No one had, released products on that, whatever. And so what I did was I decided that like I didn't want to sell a product, but services made a ton of sense to me, like recurring revenue. And I was investing in these startups. All the founders wanted to grow their personal brand. And so I started a little mini agency that was effectively helping people leverage the blueprints that I'd put in place. That by early mid 2021 had grown to be like a $75,000 a month business.
Wow.
And there was no cost. It was me. And it was my time. I was like strategy calls, helping them, doing a little bit of like helping with content, not ghostwriting anything, but like when they would write something, I would help like with the hook to make it a little better. What a lot of people now are doing as an agency business, I just kind of jerry rigged together because I thought, oh, this is a good way to like create a little side hustle out of what I know how to do. That had grown into a pretty big business and, had like 2x the revenue I was making from my day job, which was my like, high paying finance job. On the weekend I was doing, it was just like a side project. And so that started making me think about like, oh, maybe there's something to this. At the same time, I'd launched my newsletter, which had started to monetize, sponsor revenue and things like that. And so a bunch of like business and income had started coming in by mid 2021, which was when I decided, hey, I think it's time to kind of go all in on this and just see what happens. And like, I hadn't gone and done an MBA. So I kind of figured if I try this for a year or two and then it sucks, I'll just go back and get another finance job. Like finance isn't going anywhere. I have a set of skills. So that was really when I started to kind of think, oh, maybe there's something to this. You can build around it. Nice.
I'm curious by what both your parents said, but specifically, what did your Indian mom say when you said, I'm quitting my job?
My parents are unbelievably supportive in general and have way too much faith in me to like figure things out, I would say. They knew I was pretty miserable in finance. Not that I wasn't learning a lot and enjoying, but just that it wasn't like, I didn't light up when I talked about investing in finance in the way that, they would have wanted me to. And so, but I did around these new things that I was working on and what I was building. And so I think they saw that. It was also, the plan was I was going to leave my job. We were going to move back to the East Coast to be closer to them. My parents were getting older. We were thinking about kids. And I was like, let's get back to the East Coast and see what happens. My mom didn't understand it, right? Like she didn't know what to tell people. Like he's on Twitter. Like I don't know what it is. So, from there, things very quickly happened. I ended up raising my venture fund. Now we can talk about it, but like I have a holding company, I have a bunch of businesses. I've got like, there's a bunch going on. I'm signed a book deal. And so like, there's enough things now that she can tell her Indian, friends back home that I'm doing that sound impressive enough, I suppose. But yeah, it was certainly a big transition.
Nice. Scaling it back, we'll talk about the agency in a second, but you said, your agency helps people with frameworks they can use to grow an audience, mostly Twitter, but a little bit in other social networks too. What's an example of like just what a framework could look like for someone that wants to grow their audience?
Yeah, it's pretty well understood today that daily systems like daily posting is really important for growing durably on these platforms. With Twitter, the largest driver of everyone's growth has always been the thread. My hypothesis around that is that it gives you more impressions in a single post. So like when you think about ad impressions to convert a customer in anything, it's like, oh, it takes 8 impressions to convert someone. Well, with a thread, you're actually getting 8 impressions in a single tweet versus having to hit them with a good tweet, hit them with another good tweet, hit them with another good tweet until they decide to follow. And so people were leveraging that and it was outsized growth. Now, as with anything in any market, things become saturated because people see them work. And so, a bunch of people did courses or released products about like how to write Twitter threads. And so now, that's where you get the cringe memes around what threads are and like everyone posts the same threads. So everything becomes saturated and it ends up becoming a game of like be a little bit more unique or more interesting or talk about real earned experience around stuff, etc. And I tend to think that in the long run, cream rises to the top with this stuff. And like someone who's really built businesses and is really writing about these things ends up having their content stand out. But look, it's all of these content platforms. The whole game is like capture attention and then keep attention. And with Twitter, that means like the first tweet has to grab people's attention. Does that mean that sometimes it feels a little clickbaity? Yeah. My opinion is always like, if there's a scale of 1 to 10, where like 1, the person doesn't even want to look at it. 10, it's like, Chrome extensions that'll change your life. There's like probably a 5 or 6 in the middle. That's like clicky enough that someone grabs it, but not so much that you feel like you need to take a shower out of shame of what you just did. So yeah, and it's the same for Instagram. It's like the first few seconds of a video has to be really attention grabbing and get someone, and then you deliver value to them and then you convert them on the back end to whatever it is you want. So that, there's no substitute for just delivering quality on a daily basis.
That makes sense. Do you find yourself frequently not big experiments, but minor experiments with, I'm going to try something a little different this time, or is it just like just hammering the same sort of things over and over?
I don't. I mean, like, I'm very different than most content creators in that I don't have a lane that I stay in at all. You know, if there's like, if someone wants to tell me like stay in your lane, that's a fair criticism because I write about like everything from getting into a cold plunge in the morning to, you know, business stuff to like lessons, whatever. Like I'm all over the map. And that's by design. It's because like I couldn't have stayed in a lane for super long. I would have gotten so bored just because my mind doesn't work that way. I like to write about what I'm excited about or share about what I'm excited about. And, you know, that's not for everyone. And I don't think everyone can do that. I kind of earned the right to do that by getting to the scale I got to. Sort of, you know, following in the footsteps of someone like a Tim Ferriss, you know, who started out as like much more, you know, niche nomad business and, you know, expanded over time. So that's kind of, you know, like for me, I'm not focused on experimenting as much as I am just sharing things that I enjoy. And if other people like them, great. If not, that's okay. I'm sort of off the like the dopamine treadmill of likes and retweets and all that stuff now, which is great because for a while it was tough.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like how broad you've gone in turn is sort of like this trap you're into where now you kind of have to share content that's mostly top funnel since you have such a diverse group of people, or not really?
Honestly, I never really think about it. I don't, I mean,
if you posted very specific finance content for now, my guess is a big percentage of people will be like, wait, what? Like this is...
Yeah, probably. But I don't like really specific finance content, so I'm not going to share it. You know, like every now and then I encounter a business story that I think is broadly applicable that people should understand. Like Evergrande going bust last year, like the supply chain stuff is, you know, important for people to understand. The SWIFT thing when Russia invaded Ukraine, I wrote about. And I'll write about that stuff because I find it interesting to research and go into it. And again, like, I don't really care if only 1% of my audience finds it interesting. Everyone else can ignore it. And if that 1% finds it really interesting, that's great. But the stuff I really think about on a daily basis that I find enjoyable to write about is like broad life stuff that I know a lot of people are encountering. And so it naturally lends itself to that.
Makes a ton of sense. Back to what you said, getting off the dopamine treadmill. Teach me your ways. How do you do this? I like trying disabling notifications. But then I often want to create content if there's no notification. I need some dopamine. How do you kind of get over that?
Grayscale helps a lot. My phone on grayscale most of the day really helps because it just makes it less attractive to look at. I mean, honestly, it's through pain and struggle of like suffering from the addiction that you have to like hit rock bottom with it and be like, this is embarrassing how much time I'm spending. The worst is my like real rock bottom with it was realizing that something not performing to the level I thought it should was impacting my happiness when I was like playing with my kid later in that day. And I remember just like looking at myself in the mirror metaphorically and just being like, is this really like how low you are that like a thread not doing 10,000 likes that you spent time on is going to impact how you are, how you show up with your son. And I was deeply embarrassed internally even thinking that. And that was kind of my call to action of like, I need to just not look. And so my change was I basically just don't look at the numbers. And so like
how long? At some point you will look at them.
Yeah, like 24 hours later, 36 hours later, like when there's actually signal that you can discern of, okay, did this resonate? What was the conversion to newsletter? Whatever, like get actually some data from it. And now even with my team building out, someone else is doing that too. And I mean, I drew upon what great creators were doing. Like I went and asked Tim Ferriss, I asked James Clear, like I asked these people that I really respect and admire, Ali Abdaal, like YouTuber, like, are you watching your analytics as soon as the post goes up and like seeing how it goes? Because you know, you really ride an emotional roller coaster with it. It's like, I mean, it's like buying a stock and then you like sit there and stare at it.
And it's a moving target, right? Because what 100 retweets would feel like, it won't feel the drug doesn't feel the same. Like it's.
I mean, when I go back and look at my early posts, and you see that you got like 400 likes. And I remember being like, oh my God,
would have been insane.
400. And now you're just like, dude, what's wrong? I got to delete this. I got to delete this. There's something wrong with it. And there's no easy answer to it. But you have to know what your own tendency is to get addicted to these things and like figure out how to step off.
And I guess zooming out, right? Like bigger picture in life, like we're monkeys, like looking at random numbers on our phone. Like this is objectively dumb.
Yeah. I mean, flip side is if it's your job, you can, right? Like if I'm a YouTuber and my livelihood depends on YouTube ad revenue, say that's my only business, I need to really care about what videos are working and what aren't. But there's a healthy way to do that and an unhealthy way. I would argue the healthy way to do it is like 24 hours later, get all the data on like where it was, what worked, what didn't work, you know, the like watch through times, percentages, etc. The unhealthy way is like sit there and stare at the screen and let it impact your mood over the course of the whole day. And so, you know, the people that I really look up to that have figured this out, they sort of like emotionally just separate themselves from it and from the content they're creating.
And a lot of times it's probably just through the pain of having. I think everyone goes through a phase, right? You're human. You're going to go through a phase of like it affecting you, and then you kind of learn how.
I also just think it's like the people that actually have durability long-term as creators. There's a lot of people who have done like the creator thing for like a couple of years and had like a big growth and then they stall out or they struggle, burn out, whatever. The people that have like 10 plus year longevity, in large part, it's because they genuinely create content that they think is high quality and special. They're not jockeys for the algorithm. There's a lot of YouTubers, a lot of Twitter, you know, whatever, that are effectively just creating what they know will hit. And so like I talk to YouTubers and they're like, yeah, I've made this same video in different formats 10 times because I know every time it kind of works and goes viral. That's really hard to do for a long time because it's just so soul sucking and boring versus someone like a Morgan Housel, amazing writer around finance stuff, who talks about this openly, like I only write things I really genuinely find interesting. And if no one likes it, that's fine. But I'm betting that like there are going to be some people that at least do, and you attract the right people. That's easier to do when you're building businesses, revenue streams, income streams, wealth that are detached from your need to create on a daily basis.
And or you feel secure in how much you have. Like I was talking to Ramit Sethi, the same thing. He's like now just spending so much time on the psychology of money because he loves that. I mean, yes, he could, you know, go further on other topics, but he's like, I'm building a 20, 30, 50-year career. I want to do this for the rest of my life. So
and he's impacting people and positively and changing lives in that way, in his own way. And, you know, and he's made a lot of money. He has a recurring stream off his book. And so like there's plenty of real wealth that's already been created. So you don't have to worry about your ad revenue from the next video.
It's a great note to pivot into talking about the business behind your creator business. You started an agency, which is interesting. Not a lot of people go that route. How have you diversified from there?
Well, I hired operators for everything. So that was probably one of the smarter things is like, I wasn't going to spend tons of time and be able to scale my time on all these things. And so I've been really deliberate about partner with someone great that can run it and that has run it and that will run it in the future. And so today, my holding company, which is, you know, if I think about my ecosystem, there's kind of three pieces. There's like all the media stuff, which is the public facing things. That's Twitter, newsletter, you know, Instagram, LinkedIn, my book, all of that stuff, eventually YouTube. And there's my fund, which is the early stage venture fund, small piece. And then there's this holding company that today has 7 businesses under it, all like cash flow from day one businesses. So they're not, you know, venture bets. Like these are, you know, literally like either zero upfront investment or like $5,000 needed to get it started and roll out because your first clients are bringing in cash flow and it's 50% margin, 30 to 50% EBITDA margin businesses. So there's 7 of those today. They all have operators running them.
Operators full-time?
Yeah, operators are full-time, incentivized by equity, plus they're making cash. And I own anywhere from 20 to 100% of those businesses. And I mean, it's scaled today. Like I think at the end of this year, the combined like holding company will probably have a month where it does $1 million of cash flow. And I own a blended like 40% of that, right? So like there's significant cash flow that kind of comes off of all this stuff without me needing to spend tons of time. So my role with all of those is to leverage my platform to drive leads or leverage my relationships to drive leads, one of the two. And that's a really cool position to be in because if I decide to, you know, in 2 years, take a year off and take my son to see a bunch of the world and go around and travel with my wife. And I don't want to create a single thing on Twitter or anywhere. I want to write a book during that year and just be off the grid. I can probably do that because there are all these businesses that are driving income. And then, you know, a couple of them maybe enterprise value.
That's awesome. Did you stumble into this model? Like, did you create your agency and you're like, wow, this is scalable? How did you get there?
Yeah, stumbled for sure. Everything in my life is stumbling. There's no, I like to like in hindsight be like, oh yeah, I crafted this grand strategy and I decided I was going to do this. But normally it's just stumbling. The agency the personal agency that was just me was what opened my mind up to it. I originally just thought of it as like, oh, I'm doing business advisory. That was like what I thought of it as, because that's what I knew. Like, and my private equity days, we had business advisors who would help with different businesses, like consulting. So I didn't even know that it was called an agency. I was just doing it. And then that got to a scale and there was cash flow. And I was like, this actually could be a lot bigger if it wasn't just me. There's tons of people that could benefit from this. I wonder if there's a way to systematize this. And then basically, you know, I learned from really smart people who were doing this. Like Nick Huber is this guy who I became close friends with on Twitter originally. Now in real life,
running 7. He's like talking about these. He has like 7 businesses. He has an operating partner.
Totally. And so I saw starting to do this, and he and I talked together. We actually 2 of these businesses are collaborating where we work together on. But basically his whole thing was like, look at where you're currently spending money, like sort of an Amazon model, like take these cost centers and turn them into profit centers. So for me, like, you know, I was spending money on like newsletter growth. Like I was spending money to have someone run the back end of my newsletter and figure out, you know, how to drive growth with it and manage it, et cetera. Not write it, but do all the back end stuff. And I was spending money on that guy. And I was like, hey, we should actually just collaborate, turn this into a productized service, and we can do this for other people because I'm getting millions of dollars of value out of my newsletter now. It's, you know, 325,000 people today. Super, super valuable. Other people would love this and would love to pay for it. Let's create a newsletter growth agency. And so we did that. It's called Paperboy Studios, and that's live. And it's sort of like pair your unfair advantage from an audience and platform standpoint, which is the customer acquisition, with someone who's a really good operator who will actually do it on a daily basis.
Leads, right? I mean, you're delivering high quality leads.
Exactly. And if it's someone you know and you know they're high quality and that they have a high integrity, bar, it's really, really cool. So like, and you know, on that, on all of these too, it gives you it affords you an opportunity to work with people you just want to work with. Like Nathan Barry, the founder of ConvertKit, is my other co-founder in that newsletter growth one. And he's the founder of one of the largest newsletter platforms in the world. And so like getting to work with him, he obviously has leads that he can drive to something like this. And it's fun because you get to end up working with really smart, interesting people. You know, similarly, I was spending a bunch of money on design services every month for different like random websites, design, you know, brands for my startups were constantly asking me if I knew any design people. So now I'm a partner in this thing called Off Menu that's like design sprints, and they'll do a design sprint for startups, and it's awesome. So just that same model.
How hard is it to find the operating partners? I'd guess that is the most challenging to find the best.
Yeah. You know this, but like when you're out and about in the world enough and you start rolling in the right circles, it's very easy. But that like getting to that point is the hard part. I had always been really deliberate, like even early in my career in finance, about building and fostering relationships. I never thought of it as networking because nothing was, I don't like the whole transactional connotation with networking, but it was just like being around smart people broadly pays off, you know, very, very handsomely in the long run. And so I've just been very fortunate to have a network of really smart operators that are kind of in the ecosystem. And so then you're like talking to people, seeing what, seeing what they're interested in, what are they working on? And that's how the magic happens. Or you're going to start something, you talk to a friend and they're like, oh, I have the perfect guy to run this for you. It's an old friend, whatever. And it's kind of vetted. But yeah, that would be the challenge. Like for someone off the street that wants to do this, the biggest watch out is it's the wrong operator and it becomes a mess.
Has that happened to you?
I haven't had, I mean, I'm sure I will, but I haven't to date. You know, I think the big whiff, if we have one with anything that's there today, would be not capitalizing on the opportunity. Because most of them
okay and not great is like a
totally like most of them, you know, could service $1 million a month of revenue in terms of the number of leads we could quickly bring in. But if the operator is only capable of creating systems that can manage 50 grand a month in revenue, that's a big miss. Because that like me owning, you know, 20% of a 50 grand, you know, of a 20 grand a month profit business is just not that interesting time-wise relative to these other things. So that's where I would imagine the miss. There's obviously like the big miss, which is like someone commits fraud or is just like a bad operator. That's pretty mitigated by like knowing the person and having kind of reference checks.
I would say reputational risk, right? Because they're partnering with people with a big audience. I mean, that's a really quick way to mess up your reputation for life.
Yeah. On both ends though, too. Like, you know, for me, anything I'm associated with, my face is associated with in some way. And so it's the reason why you don't see me endorsing tons of products, right? Like I get inbound, I mean, 10 times a day from different like brands, NFT projects, tokens, whatever, like all sorts of stuff that you just never see me talking about or endorsing. And it's for that reason. Like, unless I'm really using the thing and benefiting from it on a daily basis, I don't want to stand behind it. And so with all my companies, I know they're really high bar because I've been involved and I know the quality because I was a customer. Like I am a customer of all of these companies. And I pay full freight for all these companies, actually. It's just, it's running through this.
Yeah. How long do you spend with each company, I guess, in time per week or time per month? Or
very little time because I don't have an operational role. My role is driving leads. And so, my role, honestly, is using their service and then being able to talk about their service publicly. It's what Nick has done really well with Support Shepherd, the offshoring business.
He just pisses people off online.
Yeah, and he's very good at it because he uses the service all the time, and then he can do his his shtick with it, and people go crazy, and it drives tons of leads. Yeah. That's my biggest role, is just share how I'm using the service, and if people are interested in something similar, it's easy to go to.
It's pretty scalable then, right? I mean, how many do you think you can handle?
I mean, I don't see why there's some you can't have overlap, right? I can't have 3 design agencies. Correct. So you kind of have to think about
which category is big enough.
Who's your horse that you want to pick within a category too. Someone that can really scale. And you want to think about, there's income and then there's wealth. Yeah. And most of these agency businesses are income versus wealth. They're not generally sellable businesses, at least not at a real multiple, because they're just, they're cash flow and they're agency models. And so a few of them I'm thinking of more as this actually has enterprise value at scale. And so I should spend more time on that. We should think about how to build it out, the different lines, and, being a little more involved strategically on those fronts, I think makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, let's pivot in income versus wealth. I guess a good transition question is, a lot of people here are business owners. Structurally, how did you structure this? Is it just a bunch of LLCs that are partnerships? And
so my holdco at the Sahil Bloom level is an S corp. That could change at some point in the future. Probably not. My overall entity being an S corp is advantageous from a tax perspective.
What would the alternative be?
There's an alternative world where you form a C corp and raise a little money at the
QSBS.
Yeah, QSBS, raise a little bit of money at the C corp level and do a holding company thing. And but today it's an S corp sitting at the top, and these are sub LLCs with whatever interest I own via the S corp. And as the team grows and as there's different considerations at the S corp level, maybe some of this stuff changes. But today it's been pretty easy to manage as an S corp.
Cool. And this could be a good pivot point either into the fund or just how you think about things. Would you at some point think about starting any of these businesses, the traditional startup? By that I mean C corp, optimizing for enterprise value, with the idea that if everything works out to plan, it could be a public company or worth hundreds of millions or whatever.
Yeah, I don't really I'm not really playing the money game. I tend to find that I make a lot of money or more money when I'm not focused on money as much. I don't need I'm not trying to make $100 million. I might do it because things are going well and that I'm getting to spend time on things I care about and with people that I like, but that's not my goal. And so when people talk about a lot of, all of the structuring things and IPOs and this could be this big and that, my head just sort of spins. I'm I like writing. I love spending time with my son and wife, and I like being around smart people. If that all ends up coming into a jumble of me making a lot of money, great. But if you're telling me hey, you could make $1 billion if you go work 80 hours a week right now, I wouldn't do it.
Yep.
I'm actually being serious. I just wouldn't do it. Yep. And so there's basically no amount of money I would trade. The next 10 years of my son's life are very, very important to me. It's the years where he's actually going to like us and want to be, we're his favorite people in the world. He really wants to be around us. There's very little you could do to get me to give that up for more money or more anything else. And that's what I'm optimizing for, is the time and the quality of that with them. So when I think about the structure of all of these things, I think there's, pieces of it. If there's something that I think is going to have a ton of enterprise value, would I flip the LLC into a C corp? Yeah, absolutely. There's smart things you can do with that. Start the QSBS clock. I have a C corp shell that it has a QSBS clock running already with nothing in it. You can flip stuff in there later. And that's just, you pay a little bit every single year, and it's basically a call option if it ends up working out. Yeah. But it's not really in a major way on my radar.
Yep, that makes sense. And has your attitude about money changed over the years? Do you think you thought about it differently at 20 versus 30?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when you're in your 20s, you have infinite energy.
Yeah.
And you basically think you're going to have that infinite energy forever. And so you're just like hustle mindset. No, I'm going to work till I drop, make all this money, do all these things. I'm going to also somehow be able to balance that with all this other stuff. Don't worry about it. I have infinite energy. And as you become 30 plus, you start realizing
you're 30
that
now. You're just
I'm 32. You start realizing that energy is finite, more and more finite over time. And the whole game becomes like, okay, with this really dwindling pile of energy, how am I going to allocate that in the highest leverage ways to things I really care about? And those things you really care about have changed a little bit. You know, like I didn't have kids. I didn't have, you know, like I had my wife and we were both hustling and doing our thing and we were traveling a lot and doing fun stuff. But to me at the time, as I was building my financial foundation, that was really important. That was what I was optimizing for. And it was great because we did build a financial foundation. Now we sort of have that. Neither one of us is like super fancy. Like, you know, I'm wearing a running watch, you know, like I'm not a fancy guy. Would I love, you know, a few nice houses, you know, like sure. But beyond that, like I don't need a yacht. I don't need a plane, all those things. And I'm not a big like changing the goalposts type person. It doesn't really happen to me as much. And so I would say like, as my life has shifted, my relationship with money has shifted in the sense that like, I'm viewing it much more as, okay, how can I like allocate my time? And I want to have free time that I can allocate into these different areas of my life that I care about. And it used to be like allocate it all towards making more money. Now it's, okay, how can I allocate some of this to like building a deep relationship with my son, coaching his little league teams, like being around for all that stuff, you know, time with my parents as they're getting older, time on my fitness and health stuff that I really care about that makes me feel alive and that I love, time for mental stuff, you know, reading, de-stressing, like just that is much more how I view my life. And so it would be very hard for me to then like go back into a mindset of everything has to be about money.
No, dude, I love that. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I talk to, especially a lot of founders who are caught on this like never-ending treadmill. I mean, for me, I think of it as a tool for freedom, really. And I think that's the healthiest way of approaching it.
And it's easy. I mean, look, the pushback against all of this is like easy for you to say when we're sitting here and you've made a bunch of money. And I totally agree with that. I think like, honestly, I think in your 20s, when you don't have the responsibilities yet of a family or maybe of a wife or of a kid, it's a great time to build the financial foundation and to like put away money, you know, set the course, like compounding, like start the clock on all of that stuff, build your engine, so that you can have the freedom to allocate into different areas that you care about as your life changes. I'm a big believer that your life has seasons and what you want to optimize for in different seasons of your life changes, and being able to think freely and be able to choose for yourself rather than have someone choose for you is the important part. And so that's like, I mean, that's what I really care deeply about, but I don't need, I mean, you've made way more money than I'll ever make in my life. I think that's awesome. I don't think you set out to do that.
I'm going back to doing the same shit I like.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. Which is why, like, that's what I'm saying.
My lifestyle hasn't changed dramatically.
No, and you're like,
stuff, like,
you had the freedom to choose, and what you chose is to go back and build because that's what you enjoyed. It wasn't the making money you enjoyed. It was the building and the fun of being in the trenches. And a lot more people need to realize that you're not just going to get, it's this like the when then psychology as I talk about it of, you know, okay, when I make 100 million, then I'll be happy. And that's not true.
But I know people like that. I know someone who wants to make their first billion. They're like, you know, and it's like the only number that changes is what you go to the grave with at the end of the day, right? Like you're already independently wealthy.
Yeah. I mean, I just know way too many rich yet miserable people.
Exactly.
And I have zero desire. Like that's to me the worst place you can be in life. Like I would much rather be broke and really happy.
Yeah, of course.
Than rich and miserable. I just think it's like, it's a sad existence.
I think obviously, you're right. There is privilege in being able to like be like, I don't have to worry about money and that basic needs are met. I think it's a Kanye West song, right? Having money isn't everything, but not having it is. But once you get past that point, I think it's very different.
It's also very few people don't stress about money. I have a close friend who, you know, I won't name here, who has at least $30 million liquid. And gets into fights with his wife about money. And they don't have kids. And they don't have a ton of like houses, you know, they're not like, there's not a reason to stress about money, but they're like, you still have that fear of losing it all somehow.
It's like what your Remy talks a lot about, this psychology. We learn this when we're kids, basically. I try to never stress about money. To me, the value is like, if I am stressing about money, even if it's the acquisition of more, I'm losing the battle, right?
you are you're like winning battles but losing the war.
Wars,
yeah,
right?
it's like the Pyrrhic victory. Yeah, the thing I find with a lot of people that have the exit wealth is there's a big separation between feeling rich with income and rich with wealth.
Yeah.
So like in the example of that friend I just mentioned, has a ton of wealth, like sitting in a brokerage account from having an exit. From having an exit. But really worries about income because not seeing, like seeing your number go down in your actual checking account because your income doesn't cover your expense every month is a bad feeling. Even if you have $30 million sitting around that is throwing off at 4%, like really significant cash that you can easily cover the expenses. It's just not a good feeling psychologically. And so I sort of get it too. Like there's weird psychology and like cognitive biases that happen here that, that at any level, people feel paranoid about wealth still. And there's this weird psychology of like really rich people that are scared of losing it all.
And again, I think a lot of this is just things that we learn with when we're growing up, and they're hard to consciously change without making an effort.
Totally.
But so given everything you have now, you talk about balance. I mean, how much do you work every week and how much do you want to be working?
Yeah. I mean, my schedule is very flexible. So I've been pretty maniacal over the last like 6 months about my time and figuring out the highest leverage places for me to use my time and then what I can outsource or get off my plate. What that means for me today is I only do calls or Zooms like one day a week. So Thursdays are when I'll do those. You won't see me on a call or like doing meetings or anything any other day of the week. And then I only try to email. I really am like actually sitting down and doing email like once a week. But every evening I'll do like 30 minutes of kind of cleaning up anything urgent. Anything really urgent comes to me via text. And so I end up being able to handle it quickly. But like I hate doing email and I have a terrible relationship with it. So I've tried to separate myself from it. My day, in terms of like how many hours I work is kind of funny to think about. Like I get up super early. I get up by like 4:30.
Wow.
And I'm at my desk by about 5. And I work like a real creative focused block from 5 to 7:30. Right now, a lot of that time is spent writing my book because I'm trying to get through that. Or it could be writing a newsletter, writing in general. And then I normally have another like 2.5 or 3 hour block in the afternoon, like 12:30 to 3:30 or something like that. Outside of those times, I end up taking my son for about 2 walks for like 3 hours total a day.
Nice.
That's like really my thinking time.
Yeah.
I sometimes listen to things, but usually I'm like either stewing on different ideas or like cranking through something that required deep thought. Like I have to give a talk and I need to kind of structure it or something. Like I'm walking, he's asleep and I'm able to like kind of really think because I'm outside. So I don't really consider that work time, but it kind of is like I'm doing something. If you really only consider time at my desk, I'm at my desk for 5 hours a day, probably max.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because at some level, so much of our work now is thoughts and things, and it's very hard to be like I'm working versus not.
Yeah, and you're constantly on in some way. Like if you're reachable by text, you're on, and people are texting you. And there's like little things that I guess I would consider work, but it's definitely different from like the in an office for 80 hours a week that I was previously doing. And it's much more like it's spiking towards my actual creative energy time during the day, which I know is super early. So I try to kind of map that out to what it looks like.
So I've noticed obviously you are truly yourself in social. You're putting, you talk about your family, you have pictures of your kid. Is that something that you've thought through or like how do you think about that? Because I know some people are like want to shield their family and feel like that's not something that they should be public about. You're very public about that. Is that a dilemma you've ever had or?
No, I mean, this all got sparked like about a year ago. I started thinking about the rise of AI and what might happen with creative, especially writing. And basically, I came to the conclusion that a lot of the actual writing was going to become commoditized because, these models would be able to produce it. And we're seeing it in a lot of ways. It's not perfectly there yet, obviously, but it's coming. And what I thought about then was if you're going to develop a connection and actually have a meaningful community, it has to be based around personality and the human connection. Because I tend to have a belief that as things become increasingly mechanized, people want to like revert to something that feels real and human. And so building a connection that is deeper than just some piece of content that made you smarter is important and was important if I wanted to do this for a period of time. And so when I see a lot of creators that are just like, they're creating, they're like, write about some mental model, write about a framework, which I do some of. If you only do that, then your audience can be taken by any AI model that can create that same piece of content eventually, right? Like they can produce the same exact writing probably a year from now as what you are in your voice, like whatever. And maybe you'll be able to leverage that to keep growing, but the depth of that connection is going to be weak in my opinion. And so I just started thinking about, well, how do you impact people then if it's so commoditized? And to me, it's like with the human connection, with the human feel of sharing the actual journey that you're on as a person. And so that was what, like when my son was born, I was going through that thinking. And that's what I really care about is like my family, my son, and that journey. And I know a lot of other people are on it. And so I started sharing more about fatherhood and about my relationship and all of that. And are there downsides to it? That will present themselves, I'm sure. Like we'll get stopped and like someone will know my son's name now in the grocery store, like come say hello to us. And it makes my wife a little, a little squirmy. I love it. Like, I think it's great if people are positively impacted, but are there worlds where someone is not as nice or like there's a crazy person? Maybe. I mean, you know me, I'm like as flowery and positive as they come. And my content is that way. I'm also kind of like that. Like I'm just a really happy, optimistic person.
I think relative to audience size, you probably have the fewest like angry people.
I think so. Yeah. And that's because I just like, I don't engage with negative people. I'm not like fighting back really. Like even when Sam tries to troll me on your post yesterday, I'm just like, dude, I don't need to like get into
most people will like, the hate you get is the hate for being flowery and being nice.
Totally.
It's like, dude, like,
yeah. And like, I can take that. I'm not like, like people were all upset about that life dinner thing. I just thought it was funny. I'm like, okay, whatever, do your thing. But I definitely think about maybe there would be negatives with it. I personally think that the positives massively outweigh the negatives because I get messages every single day from people saying that something I talked about with fatherhood or with parenting or the relationship impacted the way they were thinking about theirs positively. And that to me is really cool because I know that the things we struggle with are not uncommon. I know that everyone is going to struggle with the same, the change in your relationship with your wife when you have a kid and there's a new thing that you both love the most. And all of these things I'm going through, this journey, is a very common journey that other people are facing. And we all face it with our own variables and constraints, but it's very common. And so if I can share a little bit along the way and that helps other people think about it and we feel connected because of that, I think that's pretty cool. And I want to keep doing it.
That's awesome. Did you ever read the Tim Ferriss blog post, The Price of Fame? Do you feel any of that? Or do you feel like in your case so far, it really has been just all positive? Yeah.
I mean, I had one incident about a year ago where I posted a thread that went viral for the wrong reasons. And there was like, I actually don't think it was that crazy of a whole thing, but some people did. And it got taken in like a dark direction by like a dark part of Twitter that I had never been exposed to. And I got like a lot of angry messages, like death threat type stuff. It was like, anonymous accounts being like, you should kill yourself type things. And at that time I was like, and all it did for me was make me realize that I need to have a very high bar for anything I share and like think through, can someone take this the wrong way if they don't read the nuance of it? And since then, I just haven't really had any incidents like that because I've thought about, okay, am I missing anything? Is there a different way you could take this given its 280 characters that you would have understood if I wrote a blog post on it? And so since then, I haven't really had anything. I love that piece by Tim, and I think it's great to be aware of, but
it's terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I've talked to other people with similar audience sizes and they have not had as bad an experience. So I think it is.
I think maybe now that it's more like proliferated, like there was a lot of creators out there with different audiences, different things. And I don't know, like I'm kind of a family, like I'm not a solo, rich guy doing some like glamorous lifestyle on private jets and stuff like that. Like I'm just kind of like a family guy. And I think that you probably draw less of that. I'm also not out there, talking about how rich I am and stuff. It's just
Messiah, right? Nas Daily. He pisses off entire countries at a time. So he will have he will have millions of people annoyed at him for something he said, which is because he also just, to his credit, speaks his mind, right? He doesn't hold back and he talks about politics. He talks about a lot of things.
Yeah. So I stay out of all that stuff. And I get people yell at me now and then for like not weighing in on things. and like, oh, you have a responsibility with your platform to weigh in on these important issues. And I just totally disagree with that. Like, that's not what my platform was built around.
Yep.
People are coming to me for a certain thing, and my family is exposed on this platform. Like, all of, I share all this stuff. And so me pissing people off, pissing like 50% of people off by taking a stance on X, Y, or Z, that isn't that important to me. Just doesn't make any sense. I actually don't think that makes any sense, nor does it create value for the people that have followed me, because it's not what they followed me for.
Yep, that makes sense. I'm seeing now when I was telling a friend about this, I hate your Instagram now, because I wake up and I'm like, this guy, he's already run 10 miles and you're deadlifting like 400 pounds. And I'm like literally getting out of bed right now. Has it been an intent? Have you been, I mean, obviously you played, baseball in college. Have you been getting into fitness more lately, or just sparing more?
I've always been pretty crazy about my routines and disciplined about my workout stuff. I mean, when I started working, I would go to the gym at 4:45 so that I could get into the office by 6:30, and I was going, 4 or 5 days a week. It's just always been an important part of my life. For me, it's like mental health as much as anything, as much as physical. It's like an outlet. And I've always enjoyed just getting better at things and making progress. I would say, after years of doing the same workout and lifting routines, generally the same, it can get boring. And so I've started mixing it up more. Like the cold plunges, the sauna stuff. I'm running a ton now. I've realized my neighbor is this like big fitness influencer. He lives like a quarter mile from me. So we've been running together. And that's a new challenge, because I used to suck. I mean, 8 weeks ago, I really sucked at running. And now I'm like pretty decent at running. And it's fun just getting better at something. But my life is also set up that I have a lot of time if I want to dedicate to these different programs or trying different things. I also go to bed at like 8:30. So when you see me up at 4 in the cold plunge, I'm still getting my 7 or 8. Totally. So that's the explanation for the 4:30 a.m.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. So as you think about sort of your platform and your content, I mean, are you intentional at all about where you will go? Or is it just like, look, whichever direction my life takes, my platform will reflect that?
It's probably closer to the latter. I would say I have more of an idea, the breadth of what I'm trying to build today. There aren't tons of creators who I would say I'm like specifically trying to go down that lane. But there's a few that if you created like a vision board of like an amalgamation of, Jay Shetty, Tim Ferriss, James Clear, Ryan Holiday, I would say like, if I like landed, if that was like the stars and you like threw up and just like landed somewhere around there, that'd be awesome. I admire those guys for very different reasons in their own way a lot, and, have been fortunate to get to connect with some of them and spend time. And one of the things that blows me away, by the way, which I've never really talked about this kind of ecosystem, especially authors and these creators, is it's so positive sum, or at least they put on a positive sum face, but I'm pretty sure they really are. Like if I were in finance, it was very zero sum. It was like either I'm eating or you're eating and we're not both eating. And so like, I'm going to make sure that I eat. With these guys like James Clear, he's one of the most successful authors, obviously sold 10 million plus copies, like absurd success. Tim Ferriss, same thing, like unbelievably successful. The amount that they're willing to help a random up and comer like me early on, like now I'm, maybe I'm a little bigger, but like early on being willing to like answer a question, talk, give their perspectives to someone who conceivably could like eat into their quote unquote market over time, just with zero reservations, is like truly impressive and remarkable to me. It speaks to the type of people they are. Absolutely. But I also think just in general, the creator economy in this new like kind of technology driven world is much more positive sum and like grow the pie and we'll all get our fair share. And I really admire that about those guys in particular and the ecosystem in general. Yeah.
I also don't think you could eat into their market, right? It's not like if you read one good book, you're less likely to read another.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
How did you get connected with them early on when you were still not obviously the scale you are now? Was it always through introductions?
I think most were warm intros, or like I was in a WhatsApp group that was around creators and someone was in there and I just took it over to the side. DMs, I think I DM'd James originally, maybe he followed me or something and I DM'd him. But yeah, it was always like that. I mean, I'm a big believer in like closed mouths don't get fed. I always shoot my shot on these kind of things. Jeff Bezos followed me the other day and I DM'd him to try to see if he would get lunch. Haven't heard back yet, but Jeff, if you're listening, I'm sure I'll just keep spamming him until he does.
He will eventually. That's awesome. So when I asked my more meager Twitter audience what questions you have for Sahil, I always, got like 10 different Indian people asking questions about what do you think of India? You were recently in Bangalore. I've seen you're spending more time with Indian creators. Is that something you've been thinking about or just sort of happened?
I mean, my mom is from India. I spent a lot of time there growing up. I was there at least twice a year my whole childhood.
Wow.
My grandmother's still there in Bangalore. And so I just went for the first time since pre-COVID and spent a week. And I met a bunch of the big creators, went on their podcast and did kind of a few shows, which was a blast. I mean, I think India is amazing. The development, the pace of development. And more than anything else, just how growth-oriented of a culture it is, I'm blown away by. Like the average 22-year-old just wants to get smarter, learn, grow, make, a little more opportunity for their life and for their, for their situation. And because we're going into an increasingly, technology driven global world, there's, they're earning in a dollar, like in a global dollar economy. I mean, I worked with this one designer who I would send little projects to, and I met with him in Mumbai when I was there. We had a coffee, and he's like, moved out of his home, got a place for him and his wife, like off of people that I've sent him for business or that the money that I'm sending him. And it's just amazing. Like he had just reached out to me and offered to do work for free. And then I started paying him. And like the fact that he can improve his condition that way is very, very cool. So I'm extremely optimistic about the future of India. I'm super, super excited about the country, and I will spend more and more time there. I mean, I think my book it'll be a big market for my book. India now accounts for probably about a quarter of my new subscribers and audience in different places.
It'll probably grow. I was just seeing. Do you know how many followers Virat Kohli has on Instagram?
30 million? I don't know.
250.
Really? Oh my God.
I was off by an order of magnitude as well. He's 250 million.
It's insane.
Yeah, more than any American athlete. Like it's crazy. The scale of that is just wild.
It's super, super crazy. I mean, the growth, and Indians love Indians abroad in general. It's like it's an amazing thing and connection and cultural connection that people have. I still get the
WhatsApps anytime there's a new Indian CEO.
And it's cool. I mean, it's one of the big features of India in general is this cultural connection. I mean, my grandfather passed away in 2007, and I don't think a day went by up until COVID when she didn't have someone come and visit her to check in on her. And like in America, I think that happens for like a month. Like people come and check in on you and make sure you're doing okay. But think about that. Like we're talking about, 10, 15 years of every day people coming and seeing you.
In the way that
really incredible.
Sometimes as an immigrant, I do feel like, I love America, but the same kind of warmth, for lack of a better word, it's not
that cultural connection is powerful. Yeah, I'm really excited about the future of India. I'm excited to spend more time there, and I'm excited to bring my son there.
Yeah, I was going to just say, like, do you want to expose your son to Indian culture?
Very much so. I mean, I feel more Indian than American. Part of that is my dad's family wasn't accepting of him wanting to marry my mom, and so they disowned him. And so my family was my Indian family. I didn't have a family on my white side. My dad was my white relative. That was it. And he similarly feels very connected to India as a result, because my mom's family kind of took him in as a son. And that to me, it's been pretty deeply ingrained in me, that feeling of connection and family. And so I do want my son exposed to that. He's only a quarter Indian, and he needs a tan this summer because he's getting a little pale right now.
Does your mom try and talk to him in Hindi to teach?
No, not yet. We're going to get him. We got to get him on English first. Once he figures that out, we'll move on.
That's awesome. So I guess, again, all your content is obviously very positive. You talk about lots of positive things. What are some things that you're either struggling with or things that you're actively working on right now, either on the personal side or on the business side or challenges that you're facing right now?
On the business side, building a true business and team around this stuff is my real focus right now. I just hired an amazing chief of staff, I don't call him a chief of staff or a COO, that's sort of going to sit between me and the whole business across all of the different areas and help build out the team and manage that team as it continues to build out, and allow me to sort of float up in the clouds and do the things that I do well and not do the things I don't do well, which is managing people. I'm probably not very good at managing people because I just don't really want to. And knowing that I'm not good at that is actually really helpful, because there's a lot of people who don't realize that until it's too late. So I'm doing that now and kind of going through that process. We're doing a full strategy session here in New York later this week, and really trying to be thoughtful about that in the business and bring on the right people, scale the talent so that we can do, not so that we can do more and do it better, but so that we can actually just like do less and do it better. Like the things that I'm really good at, I want to just double down on and continue to scale. The only like new thing I think we will do is YouTube and like slightly longer form video, because the short form is doing well. And so expanding that out makes sense to me. But I really just want to be able to kind of do this thoughtfully. On the personal side, I don't know. I would say navigating the transition in your relationship with your wife or husband after a kid is one of the most challenging and interesting transitions to navigate.
And you have new identities, right?
Totally new identities. There's a new person who, for the first time in your life, you're not each other's most important person. And it's mutual. Like both people realize that like that is the most important thing. And, you know, there's just a lot of challenges that come with that. And it's great and very fruitful when you navigate and are able to communicate through those and learn and grow through those. But it's very real to acknowledge the challenge that comes with it. So I'm excited about that. Like excited to see all of these new phases of our relationship and of his life as it kind of takes form.
And do you feel good about your decision to move back to the East Coast? I know when you first told me that, because I've often talked about how I have this like immigrant guilt, like my parents are far away. So I've really been prioritizing spending as much time with them as I can. That's a decision you've made. How do you feel about it?
I mean, it's the best decision we ever made. For us personally, you know, we were probably seeing our parents once a year when we were in California. And, you know, the math on that's not great. How many times you're going to see them again, depending on how old they are. And now, you know, her mom is like our nanny basically. And they've got a place nearby us and spend there at least every other week for the whole week. And my parents, I get to see at least twice a month, often more. And so the math on how many times, you know, how much time I get to spend with them,
like 10x.
50. I mean, it's like unbelievably improved relative to where it was. And more than the like special moments, because we used to come home for like Thanksgiving, right? And so you'd be home for the like big event and you'd get together and it was this like special moment. The moments of like nothing special are actually the most special in a weird way. It's just like hanging out randomly because on a Saturday, no one had anything going on. We drove an hour to my parents' place and went and hung out and they got to spend time with Roman. And that to me is what I'll never regret. So, I mean, I'm just so grateful that my life is in a position where I can spend time with him and that our life is in a position where we can spend time with our families.
That makes sense. How do you feel about your friendships? And like, I mean, you're balancing a lot. Is that something you're still able to maintain or is?
Yeah, I would say it narrows over time. I mean, my college years and like into my early 20s was the like, everyone in the world is your friend and you're spending, you know, you're trying to spend maximum amount of time with all your friends and you're going on all the trips, you're doing all the things. Over time, it's not that you aren't friends with those people anymore, but the people that you really want to see and that you're really spending time with, that group narrows. And you figure out like who are the friends that are going to last with you across all of the seasons of your life. And normally there's like 5. It's not 50 that you had previously. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like fought it for a while and it was kind of like a painful thing of, oh, I'm actually not going to go to every wedding. What do you mean? Like I used to want to go do that. And so I think that there's like that natural transition that happens as people start to have kids and as you separate. What I'm really trying to do a better job of is like with those different pockets of friends, find a time like once a year where you just like get together, you know, like my baseball gang from Stanford, a handful of us are still really close, but a bunch of us have, you know, spread apart, but like find a time one weekend where you all go on a golf trip together. And even if you aren't the best friends in the world, you like maintain those memories and some of the, like the connections that were real there. And I'd really like to be a part of the kind of apparatus that like plans that. Because if no one plans it, no one takes the lead, it just doesn't happen. But if you plan it.
Are you the planner?
I don't really like the actual like coordination of the planning, but I'll outsource it to like my EA.
But you will like, and you will send the first text. You will send the first.
Yeah, that's the most I will definitely send the text. And like, I'm totally happy to send the text and book the house. And just be like, hey, the house is booked. So whoever wants to get themselves there, get themselves there. And like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll pay for the house. Like, you know, and doing things like that is what I really want to do. Because you know, we're fortunate that like we can, right? Like I don't, and I'm not a, you know, I paid for this, so now you send me like 1/8. It is what it is. And like, someone buys me a dinner when I'm there, like, okay,
Right,
it evens out. It's fine. I'm like, hey, I'll pay for the house, but I'm not paying for food or drinks the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Like you guys cover me, you know? So like, I do want to do that, and I want to continue to do that, and hopefully like bring people together for that reason. It gets hard, and it gets harder and harder.
Yeah, I
so
mean,
it has to be planned way in advance, but
time is finite. And what about like, I see you're spending a lot of time with other sort of, I don't know, business owners, creators, people who kind of, do you feel like those connections have been helpful in like pushing you to be better? Yeah.
Getting around people who think about the world differently than you and think about it bigger in some ways is really, really helpful. I mean, we just did this little mastermind that was kind of coordinated. I don't know if mastermind is the right term, but I know. So do I. Like, I don't know what we did. We hung out and like drank tequila. A friend of mine has this amazing place at El Dorado, this community in Cabo, and hosted it. And it was 8 of us. And I'm going to convince you to come to the next one, actually. And it was amazing. Like basically, there was nothing during the days. You were free to just spend time with each other and hang out and eat fish tacos and chill. But in the evenings, we did some programming where it was basically like each person had a chance to kind of talk through what their business was, what the big challenges they were facing, and have the whole group spend like 30 minutes or an hour sort of pressure testing them. Like, what are you not thinking about? What are you thinking about? Why aren't you thinking about this? Push back on stuff. And I would say that every single person came away with some newfound insight about what they were doing. I certainly did. I mean, I knew it was going to be fun, but I didn't think I was going to leave with like real clear things that were going to allow me to level up. And that was really powerful. It was just like get around smart people and good things happen.
Can you share an example of one of the things you left with from like a specific thing?
I mean, the team one, what I just said I'm focusing on was from that.
Interesting.
Basically, it was like, I've been doing this all on my own for the last year. And I know I can continue doing that at the current level. But if I envision a world where this is 10x as big, I'm going to be in a really, really tough spot, either with my time or the quality is really going to suffer. And the merits and how you hire and how you incentivize and how you think about the structure and the org was a big, big one for me. The other one was like, stop playing small ball with things. Like stop, doing these like stupid trades of your time for like a couple $1,000 here, a couple $1,000 there, when you can do something like meaningful. And when you can just, pause and think about like, okay, what is the $100 million opportunity? What is the 50 million? And again, I don't quite care about the money enough there, but the point that they're making around like really thinking bigger about time and the efficiency and the leverage on it versus the time for money trades was a really good one for me to hear.
I think so much of that also comes down to who you spend time with. If you're around people who think bigger, you think bigger, right? It's motivating in that way.
I was very, very inspired by that for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, we're a couple of wrap-up questions. So in your journey as a creator, I'm guessing you've honestly had a pretty good path relative to most. I mean, things kind of worked, but are there any mistakes you made or things that you would avoid if you had a do-over?
I'm not a big believer in the like do-over thing because I think it generally leads to wherever you are today. I would say
in this theoretical world, you can pick and choose and whatever. Right?
I'd say I probably would have done it sooner. I was like really scared of making the jump and didn't think about just how good the things were doing on my path. Like I probably was like 5 or 6 months. I probably would have built out a team sooner. I think I've taken way too long to do that, to scale up what I'm doing. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with the way it's all gone. Yeah.
I mean, again, as I said, you had a pretty good path. So and sometimes
I think a piece of that was that I came from like a real clear business background. I think that has been a real advantage for me because everything from the get-go I was thinking about with a lot of commercial instinct from my finance and from my investing background.
The team you've hired, you've worked with people.
And I was thinking about like diversification away from just being a creator from the get-go. Like I haven't really done the course thing. I haven't done the product thing. I was like really thinking about business income streams that could sit alongside a platform to where today I think about my platform as like customer acquisition for business earnings rather than like an income thing in and of itself. Like my newsletter, I basically run to break even. It makes a bunch of money, but I reinvest it all into the growth of the platform. And so if you can do that, I think there's something really powerful that you can build from an ecosystem standpoint.
Was this your first time kind of going on your own? Or?
Yeah. Yeah.
You've always been, and you're not going back to corporate America after this.
I don't think so. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Like if something totally fails or I end up being forced to, then maybe I would. But yeah, no, I had joined a fund straight out of college and done that for 7 straight years until this happened.
That's awesome.
And I don't come from an entrepreneurial background, so it was definitely it felt very weird to step off the risk averse path that I was on and onto this.
Yeah, but awesome.
Yeah.
Final question. So what? And again, this came up on Twitter, but what advice would you have for a young creator, basically someone, in their early 20s who's going down this journey of like starting their own business, not tech startup, there's enough people giving, advice on that, but like who wants to be a content creator, business owner?
Yeah. Write about or create about what you're actually interested in. It's impossible to have the durability and sustainability necessary to win if you are faking it, if you're being someone that you're not. And I think I see way too many people doing that. And they're like the flash in the pan, right? Like they get the big spike and they think they're doing well and it's just not going to last. You got to be in the game a long, long time. I think about that in everything in life. I was like running this road race a few weeks ago and there was this guy that like, I was like ahead of him and he like randomly like blew past me at like mile 7. It was like a 15K, so 9.3 miles. And he was in front of me. And I remember just like in my head, I was like, you kind of went too early. I was like, you might like be ahead of me now, but I'm going to beat you.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, I knew what I was doing and I knew that there was like a pace that I could hold. And sure enough, at like mile 8, I blew by and I think I beat him by like 2 minutes or something in the end. It's like in Fast and Furious when the dude presses on the NOS tank and the guy goes like too soon or whatever. It's just, you don't want to like press that button and like turn on the jets. You need to be able to do something that you could do in your sleep over and over again and enjoy it.
Yep.
Because otherwise it's going to come across that you don't care.
Yep. That makes sense, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, this was awesome, man. I'm glad to.